Good morning. Today we're going to look at Acts chapter 10, verses 1 through 23. And a heads up that tomorrow morning I'm going to be on early. I have an 8:40 appointment, and so that means I won't be on at 9 o'clock for sure, but I'll be on earlier in the morning. And for those of you that watch on the YouTube, I'll get today's uploaded, but I won't get Tuesday or Wednesday uploaded until sometime on Thursday, just as a heads up that way. Chapter 10 begins with the story of Cornelius. He was, it says, a centurion of the Italian cohort. So he was, kind of a sergeant or a corporal or something, but he had a cohort of soldiers under his command. So he was, a fairly high-ranking officer and a very devout follower of God. Doesn't mean he wasn't Jewish, but he knew of God, and he prayed to God on a regular basis, it tells us. He was a devout man who feared God with all of his household and gave generously, of alms and to the people and prayed constantly. And one afternoon at 3 o'clock, which was kind of a time of prayer, as he was praying, an angel came to him and said, Cornelius, greeted him by name. And it's just, I think that's an example for each and every one of us that, God knows who we are. And if God sends an angel, that angel will know who we are. But Cornelius is surprised, frightened by this angel, but the angel says to him, your prayers and alms have been noticed by God, and he would like to, introduce you a little bit more. He says, now in Joppa, there's a certain man named Peter staying at the house of Simon, a tanner, and whose house is by the seaside. And so, he was instructed to send for this Peter. And there's some interesting stuff here. That Peter, one of the leaders of the disciples, is staying with Simon, who is a tanner. And Paul, who was Saul, Paul is a tent maker. A tanner was not very well respected by the Jews because they worked with, the carcasses of animals, to make the leather and those things. On the other hand, Paul, a tent maker, was highly regarded. But the tents were also made out of leather or out of goat's hair. But it's just kind of interesting that the person that makes the leather, works with the animal carcasses, which are unclean, is, a person, you don't want to hang out with. But yet the tent maker, the person that works with the finished product, is okay. It's just kind of one of those strange things that strikes my fancy. So the angel had left from Cornelius, and he calls 2 of his slaves and a devout soldier. And he tells them everything that the angel had told him, and he sends them to Joppa to talk to Peter. Now, on Saturday, at the end of chapter 9, Peter had healed Aeneas, who had been bedridden, and then had been called to Joppa because Dorcas, Tabitha, same person, different names, just like Paul, Saul, had died. So Peter was in Joppa, and he goes then to Cornelius. And Cornelius is a Gentile, a leader of the Italian cohort. And so it's possible that Cornelius is the very first Gentile convert to Christianity, or to believing in Jesus. Wasn't called Christianity yet, but anyway, as Cornelius sends these men, Peter goes up on the rooftop to pray. And, he's hungry and asks for something to eat. And just by coincidence, God sends this something like a cloth down, a tablecloth, or, a large sheet filled, it says, with all kinds of animals and reptiles. And the voice says, Peter, rise, kill and eat. But these reptiles and these 4-footed animals that were on this were all unclean, according to the Jewish traditions. And so, this is one of the traditions that like yesterday that I talked about some of the false teachers were saying they had to become Jews before they could become Christian or believers in Jesus. But, because these Gentiles, they ate some of these unclean animals, and we still do today. I mean, we eat the meat of pigs, which was one of the unclean animals of that day. But regardless, and Peter was, he says, "No, Lord, I can't do that. That's against the Jewish traditions and Jewish law." And the voice from heaven, "What I have made clean is not unclean." And it's, Jesus talked about that, that, making things clean or unclean. And Jesus had made things clean that were forbidden to eat previously to that as well. But 3 times this sheet came down with this, and the voice of God, "Rise, kill, and eat." And then this same voice says to Peter, "Get up now and go downstairs, for these 3 men have come to call you to go to Cornelius." So he goes downstairs, and the people had just gotten there. It says they were asking for Simon's house and were standing by the gate. And they were asked if this Peter, Simon, who was called Peter, was standing there. And Simon said, "Hey, I'm the guy you're looking for." And so Peter hears their story. And their story, Cornelius. I mean, and this is the description that these people have for Cornelius. Cornelius, a centurion. That's primary. His, like a major, a general, a corporal, whatever. A centurion. I mean, he has respect. He has, people say something or he says something and people respond. A centurion. And then an upright and God-fearing man, who is well spoken of by the whole Jewish nation. So there were Jews there that knew Cornelius, and he treated them fairly. And it was, some of the giving of the alms and supporting the poor and the different things that Cornelius did, put him in high esteem with the Jewish people there. And so this is one of the things that they say to Peter as an introduction of Cornelius, as a way of saying, he invites you to come, and he wants to visit with you about this Jesus. And so when Peter finds all of that out, it says he invites them in and gives them lodging for the next day. And then the next day he gets up and goes with them. And I always kind of chuckle when I read that he invited them in and gave them lodging. I mean, he was lodging with Simon, a tanner. I mean, it wasn't even really Peter's house, but yet Peter invited them in and was a hospitable host. And I think about Peter too. I mean, here he is now in Joppa. I mean, and remember that Jesus healed Peter's mother-in-law. So, Peter is a married man. He's got family back there. But yet here he is out following the instructions of God and listening to God and preaching and teaching about Jesus Christ. But he goes with these unknown people to go and visit with Cornelius. And, in today's world, I mean, we've been taught so much, don't go with strangers, don't talk with strangers. And then and it's such a switch today because you call an Uber, and so many times now we are dealing with strangers that we don't even have any idea about. And I think within that we have opportunities to share who we are. But I'm sure that for the most part, when you're interacting with someone, or maybe you encounter someone new, we're a little hesitant a lot of times to start a conversation about anything. But yet, I mean, we are God's children here on this earth, and we are to speak and to teach and to share the love that we have for Christ, the faith that we have in God.